Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. If you're a music fan from Melbourne, the chances are pretty good you've heard of Beth Seymour. By her own admission, it's a name you might not be quite familiar with just yet. After all, as she says, new name, new her, new era. But for years, Beth has been a vital part of the Melbourne music scene, with an irresistible combination of earnest lyricism, power pop melodies, and a punk attitude resulting in a sound that is, for folks like myself at least, impossible to ignore. You might have caught Beth making music as part of La Famiglia, or even as part of the burgeoning Hormones. Now, you're likely getting ready to experience Beth as a solo artist all over again, with a new era officially kicking off today thanks to a new solo single. It has been a little while since we last heard from Beth, and in that time, quite a bit has changed. She came out as transgender, continued to work as a prolific musician, and has now reintroduced herself to the world with new single, Medication. Backed by faithful backing band the Lizzies, Medication is one of those songs that is truly arresting. It's hard not to be moved by the honest, heartfelt lyrics, the raw performance, and the acoustic instrumentation which allows you to connect with it on such a deeper level. Give it a listen, and if you're not a fan, be very surprised. This week, Beth was kind enough to join me for a chat, which is one of the longest this podcast has seen to date. If you like a couple of music nerds talking about songwriting, power pop, and more, you are well catered to this week. Anyway, I strongly urge you to check out Beth's new single Medication, and once you're done giving that a spin, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Beth Seymour, thank you very much for joining this episode of Trusty Chords.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm very excited to make this the Beth episode yet, and I'm sure that's a joke you haven't heard at all, have you?
Well, look, it's a new name, so,
Yeah.
It's all jokes are new at some point.
Exactly right. But look, before we start properly, I feel I need to ask the standard question, which is, for those who don't recognize your name, could you give me a quick few words on who you are and why we're chatting today?
Well, I'm back. Basically, I previously performed under my dead name, which I will say it was Luke Seymour. I've all that music is still out there. I recorded like a million songs and a million albums under that name, and I don't have any problem with people still listening to it. I just don't want to hear that name in front of me. But I'm transgender, I'm out, and I'm gearing up to start releasing music under my true name.
At the start of these podcasts, I always love to ask the question about, do you have a recollection of your earliest memory of when music first resonated with you?
Well, thinking back about it, I reckon I had absolutely zero interest in music whatsoever until I was about 12 years old. And my parents and my big sister were super into music, and I was just like, not interested. And the way things usually work for me is like, once I make a decision on something, that's it. That's my mind made up forever. So I was about 12 years old, and I remember hearing Linkin Park in the end for the first time.
It's a transformative experience for everyone, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Like, hybrid theory's perfection, right?
It really is.
So, and it like awoke something in me. And from that point on, music was like the only thing I cared about. And it was the only thing I ever really considered wanting to do from that point forward. Like, I hadn't really made music before. I'd had piano lessons and stuff like that at school, but wasn't really interested beyond like, oh, this is a thing I do to get out of class every now and then, to that switch flipping, and suddenly now I just want to make music for the rest of my life.
It's actually also funny that you mentioned that, because like when I first started learning how to play guitar, I learned it pretty much as a way to sort of get out of class. And one of the first things that I was taught was the riff to "In the End" by Linkin Park. So it's a very sort of full circle for the both of us here. But it's amazing how that sort of like happens, though, isn't it? How you just sort of you're hearing. I mean, I don't want to keep harping on Linkin Park, but you hear those notes and you just sort of like, you know what? That's what I want. I want that as my life.
There's just this level of melancholy in that piano riff that you hear, and it's just like lights come on and you connect with it. New metal gets a bad rap now, but good music is good music, and that
Totally.
is very good music. My piano never teacher never taught me that song on piano, though.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
I had to
If you
work
ever
it
get
out
that
for
far,
myself.
yeah,
But it was kind of funny. Like whenever we were in primary school, I would always conveniently have my piano lessons whenever the rest of the class was doing the recorder. So I played wind instruments later. I never learned to play the recorder because I
yeah,
was always out of class at my piano lesson.
fair enough. But I mean, apart from Linkin Park, I guess, were there any particular artists around that time, when you first started getting into music that you remember listening to, like in earnest?
Linkin Park, Silverchair, that was right around the time Diorama came out, and I'll die on my hill that that's the Silverchair album. It's just a masterpiece. Obviously, in 2002, Eminem was inescapable. So, as much as I've always loved, alternative music and punk music and everything, rap was like one of my first loves
Yeah.
as well. And that probably comes back to falling in love with Linkin Park before I fell in love with anything else.
I think for the sounds of it, like I'm fairly sure that we must be like almost the same age because just the fact that like our musical sort of experiences seem very similar. Like I remember actually asking my parents, "Hey, can I get a copy of Eminem's Without Me for my birthday?" And my birthday comes along, and I'm like, "Wait, no, it's not here. They didn't get it for me because of the language, probably." But actually, I mean, also you mentioned like Silverchair as well. Like a few years ago, when I had the chance to interview Daniel Johns, I actually said to him, "Hey, you know what? I did not get the diorama at first. It didn't. I hated it at first. I don't know what was wrong with me, but like this later in life sort of chance to revisit it, I'm like, you know what, this is perfection. So I can see where you're coming from there.
It's something that takes a while to make more sense. I think even having got that album at 12, I don't think I fell truly in love with it right away, but I definitely fell in love with The Greatest View right away and the other singles off that album. And then they're messing around with orchestras and weird song structures and arrangements. And these days I listen to that record. And I feel very similarly about Neon Ballroom as well, that there's always just like, we're going to put two grunge songs on these records just to keep the old fans happy.
Yeah.
And those are kind of the songs I have no interest in on those two albums. It's all that weird stuff that I really like. And Daniel Johns being that mad creative genius that he is,
Yes.
that really appeals to me.
Absolutely. So basically, what I'm hearing is that you want to be that mad creative genius and just have total control. Get Van Dyke Parks in to do like all the string arrangements for you.
Well, I'm always messing around with something,
Yeah.
I always just like to see what I can come up with and what I can mess around with to do something completely different. And that probably goes back that far.
And that's a pretty good segue as well, because like when it actually came to you really starting to like learn how to play music, like when did you sort of say like, hey, I'm fuck off the piano, I'm going to actually like pick up a guitar or something and start sort of making music in earnest.
Well, if you'd asked me again when I was a kid, I probably would have told you I wanted to be a stand-up comedian before I ever wanted to be a musician. But as soon as I fell in love with music, I started trying to write songs. But again, I played piano, keyboard, and wasn't that interested in it. But I started writing lyrics straight away, and it was always like, first off, I think I took that comedy angle and I was trying to write all those comedy kind of songs, and that evolved into, once I started getting into punk and stuff, there's all those kind of semi-comedy punk bands like NoFX that I find really hard to listen to now. And I started trying to write a lot of lyrics like that. But getting into playing guitar to be able to write my own songs in full was sort of born out of necessity, in that, at my school and the people I hung around with, there wasn't really anyone else who was interested in the same music that I was, or people who said that they were interested in playing in bands. We're 13, 14 years
Yeah.
old, um, we're, couldn't commit to things or weren't able to bring to life the visions that I had. So at about 15 years old, I just forked out some money. I bought a guitar right at the start of, I think it was the mid-year school holidays in year 10. And I just locked myself in my room for those 2 weeks. Like the week before the holidays started, a friend had taught me how to play a power chord on the guitar. And I learned to play guitar by writing songs, or I would, look up tabs and things for the bands I liked around that time, like Rancid and Bad Religion and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I would learn to play a song and then be like, okay, well, I'm going to try and write something like that. And so I probably wrote a song every day for that whole school holidays. And then from there, pretty much up until the end of high school, my whole family would go to bed and I'd just be sitting there playing my electric guitar unplugged, trying to write more and more and more songs. And a few years ago, I recorded those songs I wrote in high school, EPs. There's 4 EPs of that because I had this sort of nostalgia for all those songs I wrote around that time. And I think it's interesting to look at how people got into songwriting. So I tried to record those as true to the original songs as possible. So I guess not a lot of people have a record of this is my earliest attempts at songwriting out there that they're proud to show people. But I've done that.
Yeah.
So
because that was going to be my next question is like, because a lot of people when they first start writing songs, they're not that good. And then, if you look at them like with years of hindsight, you're just sort of like, oh, hang on, could have done this better. But if you've actually gone back and like, revisited them, I mean, like, were they all good quality? Were they all sort of worthy of recording, or were there a few that you sort of had to leave on the cutting room floor?
I think, the charm to those songs comes from the fact that they are a bit melodramatic and the lyrics are a bit over the top and cringy. Like you're never as unfiltered with your emotions than you are when you're 16, right? And you've been listening to nothing but Alkaline Trio CDs for years. And all of a sudden it's all, knives and skulls and things like that and heartbreaks that you haven't really had.
Yeah.
So
I'm feeling very seen right now.
we've all done it.
Yeah.
It's just, I almost look at that as, it's almost like a kind of a project with a sense of humor to it and a self-awareness that those songs aren't great songs, but they become enjoyable by the nature of that purity from the era that I wrote them.
Yeah. So you obviously started like writing around then in high school. So if I'm correct, were you only in one band? Like, was it Miyazaki you were
What
in?
it's a bit tricky with the timeline and stuff.
Yeah, because I'm trying to work it out. But
Miyazaki started when I was about 18 or 19, so it was after I finished school. But it was more or less the evolution of my high school band, which was called Starlight Ray Gun, which getting that name, I just misread the name of the band Stray Light Run and was like, well, this sounds way cooler, right? That's a way better name. So we used it. You'll not find anything. We never recorded anything with that band or anything, but Josh, who's a really close friend of mine and has done a lot of musical projects with me over the years, and was the bass player in Miyazaki and basically like my partner in music for, the first half of like my late teens and the first half of my 20s. We broke that band up and then tried to do other projects and then just ended up coming back together. And Miyazaki was around for 6 years. And I think that's really where I start to see myself come into my own as a songwriter on those records. Because again, there's a quite a bit of music out there from Miyazaki, but we were playing all these shows and doing all this stuff but didn't really know how to show it to people and get people interested in. And we broke up in 2016 after putting out our last EP. And it was when that EP came out that people really started to take an interest in that band. But by then we were like, well, we've been doing this for the last 6 years or so, or a decade if you look at include Starlight Ray Gun in there, and we're just kind of done with it.
So I'm assuming then it was 2016 you started doing some solo stuff because it would have been 2016 I think was the first time I actually became aware of you because I saw you play at the old bar with, as they were then known, West Everton Brothel Party, and I remember just like seeing you and just thinking you just seem like a true performer. Like it just felt you were made for the stage.
Oh,
As like
thank you.
as a performer, are you naturally confident or or do you just hide it well?
Um, I actually have really bad stage fright,
Mm.
but I think once I'm up there, I'm, for lack of a better term, kind of like dissociated and having an out of body experience, particularly while I'm playing and just try to do it. Uh, I think there was this viral TikTok stand up comedy bit that went around years ago where this girl was saying, well, people think I'm confident, but actually I'm just loud. And
Right. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think that illusion of confidence comes from uh, just having a big, loud voice and being a little bit, silly and wacky and goofy.
Yeah, right. No, I mean that makes sense because I always tend to find that the folks that seem the most confident are actually very very like shy and reserved off the stage or something. And that was what I was thinking because I was just like you just seemed like like it pretty much seemed like you just got up on the stage and you were just like, yep, this is nothing to me. Like you want some songs, you got some songs sort of thing. So it is like it's quite fascinating to actually know that it's not like a natural thing.
Well, I've been playing so long, like as far back as I can remember. I've been, writing songs and playing shows, and playing solo was happening, as far back as, being in Starlight Raygun and all through Miyazaki, I was doing solo sets and stuff because I used to hang around, Melbourne people would know, particularly in the eastern suburbs, this record store Fist of Face that used to be
Yes.
out in Ringwood, which is right near where I grew up. And they
I'm
do
pretty
these
sure I still have a Fist to Face hoodie in my. I never got to go there, but I got a lot of stuff from them.
iconic logo too.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, on the hoodies and the beanies and the shirts and everything. I used to hang out there so much that they'd have these acoustic in stores and they'd be like, well, okay, we'll just throw Beth on. And so I was doing that for a really long time. And there's some crossover between the end of Miyazaki and the start of Seymour Band by about 2 years. But I think the first music we released, under my name, came just after Miyazaki had broken up.
Right.
But it was born by nature of I was just writing so many songs, and the sound of Miyazaki had evolved a little bit. It was heading in more this sort of indie emo kind of direction with very active drums and more like bigger guitar parts and stuff like that. That I was still writing a lot of stuff for the acoustic guitar, folky sort of songs because I've always had that folk punk sort of influence on what I do. So we just couldn't play those songs with Miyazaki. So the solo sets there then evolved into this new band. And I think it was our keyboard player Brenna's idea that we put together another band because I'd played saxophone in her band, which had broken up. And she's like, well, these songs that you're not recording with Miyazaki are just so good. I'm not boasting about songs or anything. It's just those are her words. But like they're too good to not be playing in a band. So we pulled that band together, and we're getting quite a few shows already. Then Miyazaki split up, and I was just able to fully invest my time in doing that for a really long time.
Right. It's like it's just such a very storied musical history, isn't it? Especially when you start looking at it like this, you're like there's so many sort of like overlapping parts and everything.
Yeah. I've just done so much, I guess, and
Yeah,
I've never had to think about it before.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's also another very good segue because one of the reasons we're chatting today is because you've got the new single Medication, which for those listening, it comes out today. For us recording, it comes out in like 5 days' time. Um, so I've had the privilege of listening to this song for a few weeks now, and I truly love it. Like, it's actually one of
Oh,
those
thank
songs
you.
that, like when I first listened to it, it really gave me shivers. And I'm not really saying that just to pump your tires or to, start bringing all these, good quotes your way. But obviously, this song is very important for you. Like, it's your first song since 2023, and it's also a huge return for you because it's the first song you've shared since you announced last year you were transgender. So, for you, Beth, what does this song mean for you? Not just from a professional musician side of things, but personally as well.
Well, it feels so good and so rewarding to be able to release stuff as me and not as what I guess you talk about how I acted um when I was performing in that stage for Soda and stuff like that, which I guess almost was like a character. And not that it was all completely fake or anything. What I mean by that is like that kind of illusion of confidence is, something that you put on when you're performing. And so I wouldn't say that there was a lot of times previously that I was so raw and real and vulnerable as I am on this song. Because in the past, I was writing songs that kind of alluded to not quite being myself for years, right? And there are songs that I explicitly know, and I talk about it a few of the acoustic shows I've done, like this song "Paint" off the second Seymour Band record is explicitly about gender dysphoria, but I couldn't be up there on stage saying this is about gender dysphoria when I was in the closet. So, I had this songwriting style where I would layer what things are really about buried under metaphors, right? And I'd say, okay, people can read into that whatever they want to think it's about. And that song in particular, well, a lot of people can relate to the idea of not being comfortable in their skin, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't saying what it meant for me, and between songs, I wouldn't really want to be vulnerable when I was performing. So, you'd have a bit of a sense of humor and joke around and stuff like that and not really get into the weeds of why I wrote these songs. So, medication now feels like the start of something where I can say, hey, take from this song what you will and what it means to you. I really hope it means something to you, but also I want to give you that clarity and that background into why I wrote it because it's given me it's taken me all this time to get through the personal struggles that I've had. And now I can just explicitly write and put out this song that is about, well, I'm taking my medication and I've overcome all these insecurities and I haven't been comfortable with the thoughts that were going through my head. And just be able to put that song out there and talk about that. And that in itself gives people now something to relate to, not just reading a meaning into the song, but there are plenty of people out there with experiences similar to mine, trans or not. Like people have mental health struggles and so many people are medicated to get through the day and there's no shame in it. And if this song helps people feel comfortable with that and alleviates a bit of stigma, that would mean the world to me.
Honestly, that's a really like profound way of actually explaining it to the point where I actually sort of a little bit lost for words as what to say. But I mean,
Thank you.
like that also must feel amazing for you to actually be able to be yourself now as well. Because I can only imagine that previously when you had songs like Paint and you're sort of saying like, "Hey, this is how I feel," but then you can't really sort of broach it as a subject. You sort of unmasking it with humor. That must have felt very difficult for you to sort of like get close but not quite break through. But now you can just sort of say, "Yes, I'm writing these songs. This is me."
I think I was so locked up in a little shell for so long that, you know, you know, eh, when you look at it like that, it sounds like a very sad existence, doesn't it? So I don't want you to sit there or people listening to this to listen and think, well, I was miserable the whole time I was performing. No, I had those are the best memories of my life. I had such a great time, playing that old music with that old band, and I love those three people, more than anything in the world. But I coming out and going onto hormones and getting medicated and everything, it's like it's unlocked feelings in me, like emotions that I didn't know I wasn't experiencing. And so now performing for me feels like a completely different experience. And so far, I've only started performing solo shows again towards the end of last year. Like I can't think of around when it was. Probably early September. And the first show I did, I probably only played one or two new songs and did a lot of old stuff, and was just a room full of my friends watching me and people who had seen me play for years, being able to say, this is what this song is about and this is why I wrote it. And then as I'm playing through these songs that people have heard a million times, like Judas and Hand Me Downs and Paint and pop songs, these songs that are so in the Beth canon as, the songs people have enjoyed the most of mine over a decade. I'm seeing these looks change on people's faces as they're listening to them, as I sing certain lines. And those lines of lyrics are now completely recontextualized by new information. And people have told me, that's a song that I loved before, but now I love it in a way that's completely different and it means even more to me. And if it's being able to help people reconnect with that old music, like that's why I never want to take that old music offline or get rid of those old records or anything, because those are the pieces of, who I am and who I've been in my life. And it's the story of who I am up until I've got here.
And obviously, like, I don't want to spoil things a little bit, but you have been making music rather prolifically during your little hiatus, I guess, before your comeback. And like, so was it difficult to sort of work out what song you wanted to return with, or was it sort of easy in a sense that this was a song that sort of like meant quite a bit?
I think it just felt like such a no-brainer because this song in particular, being an acoustic track, which I don't know that I've ever released an acoustic track as a single before that wasn't like an acoustic version of a band song that was already out.
Yeah.
That I'm starting off with something very vulnerable that people can hopefully connect to because of the bare bones of it, like in the same way that people have been connecting with those solo sets that I've done. The Lizzies, as it stands right now, like my current band, it's me and it's Marty, who was the drummer from the old Seymour band. And basically we're going to look at it as, if we're going to play live or work in the studio, we're going to bring in who we want to bring in, and it doesn't need to be a locked set of people every time. It's the two of us and this deep connection between the music that we're doing that drives that project. And Marty said to me once, he works at a music backline hire place, and all his colleagues are musicians, and they're having a conversation once, what's a song that you wish you'd written? And Marty said, this isn't even like a successful song and it's a song that's not even out yet, but I wish I had written Beth's song Medication. And so that song means so much, as much to him as it means to me. And all he does on this recording is play shakers and tambourines. But, you know, it's a song that means so much to the both of us that, you know, it feels so right to put it out first.
I mean, it is such a it's such a wonderful song, and like it's one of those sort of songs that like I always appreciate a lot of songwriters in how they're able to write something that can you hear it the first time and you're like, oh, this is powerful. Then you really sit with it and you're like, wow, this is actually really powerful. And like as someone who is like I've also made music for years, many of it shit. But when I listen to it, I'm just sort of like, fuck, I wish I could have written a song this simple and this effective. You know what I mean? And that's I mean, I say simple. I certainly don't want to sort of diminish your talents at all. But I just like I listen to it. I'm just like, this is so good, and I feel like I'm just going to keep stroking your ego here. But
Yeah,
it's
thank
an
you.
amazing song, truly.
Yeah, I think the charm of that song is its simplicity, and the simplicity is comes from design. Now, I'm a songwriting nerd, and so I'm so thrilled to be here today and be able to nerd out
There's kind of nerds.
over songwriting stuff. Right? That song, the vibe going through my brain when I first came up with those chords was the song Unsatisfied by the Replacements. And if you know that song, there's about 2 lines of lyrics in the whole song, with some little like rambling between, but just the words, look me in the eyes and tell me you're satisfied. Are you satisfied? Over and over and over again over this melancholic chord progression with a lot of suspensions in it. So I was sitting there in my office at my day job just after work one day, just strumming the guitar, just playing um, that chorus progression from Medication over and over and over again before I'd written the song. And I was just humming to myself, just that simple tune, simple lines of lyrics started to form in my head. And I reckon I had written that song just after I finished work before I went home in the space of about an hour. And all that came from that afterwards was just a little bit of fine tuning. And I reckon I went into the studio at home probably the next day to record the first demo of it.
Because I always hear about those stories where I think people like Ben Lee talks about they wrote cigarettes will kill you in 15 minutes. And every time I hear that, I'm just like, you son of a bitch. I'm like, how did you write something so sort of good, so quickly and everything? I mean, like I could only assume as a songwriter, that's the sort of thing you're always chasing as well. You're always sort of like, I really want to capture that inspiration and turn it into something good so quickly. But you're obviously also aware that good things do take time. But if you're able to make it in an hour or something, you must be thinking, hey, I'm doing pretty good, right?
Well, sometimes it feels like cheating, but if I look at the way I write songs now versus the way I wrote songs years ago, I used to, I'm thinking way back to when we were working on Miyazaki stuff and be like, oh, these lyrics have to be perfect and I have to come up with the most clever thing that nobody else would think of. So I'd sit on a song for months, and in my little lyric book, I would leave lines blank, being like, okay, I've got all the other lines in this verse, and I'm just going to sit and wait for months until the perfect line comes to me that nobody else would think of. And I look back on those songs now, there's a lot of great songs I love on those Miyazaki records, but I think I was trying to be too smart, or not smart, like too different, whatever, I digress. And now I've kind of sat in it because, the Ramones are one of my favorite bands of all time. And their songwriting is simple. And the choices that they make with lyricism and melodies might be obvious choices for the rhyming word or the line that comes next. But sometimes that's the best choice, right? And so the way I write songs now is, I see what comes out, and a lot of the songs I've written recently, I probably have written in a day versus months. But now it's not so much as waiting for the best thing to come. It's revisions and fine tuning from there as I'm working on things in the studio. Because I like to demo songs that I come up with quite quickly. And then I sit on those demos and I think, how can I make it better? 'Cause I know a lot of songwriters who are the kinds of songwriters who'll write a million songs and then say, okay, I'm making this record. I'm going to pick the 10 and the rest are going in the bin. But to me, and I don't know, maybe it's the neurodivergence in me or something, but I those songs are my babies, right? And rather than say that song isn't what it needs to be, I'm going to abandon it. I'm like, I'm like, no child left behind on this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fine tune it until just about every song I write becomes usable in some way. There's still a couple that end up, gathering dust and never seeing the light of day. But I try to work and find ways that whatever song I write, it could be something that comes out eventually. Because I don't like the idea of just abandoning something that's come from inside me.
Yeah. So basically, decades down the line, when we finally crack open the Beth Seymour archives, that we're going to find like say, oh, okay, this song turned into this turned into this. Like there won't be any sort of totally new ones that never got sort of light of day.
Yeah, well, this is something that's kind of funny with Marty because I'm trying to think of what the word for it is, but like in a fantasy movie or a novel, there's somebody who like keeps the knowledge, he keeps the scrolls, and Marty's kind of that for me because I'll always send him whatever demos I'm working on and whatever new songs pretty quickly, and he'll always listen to them. And then years later, I'll bring back a new song where I've taken parts from one of those old songs and repurposed them. And he'll say, hold up a minute. This new song, All My Friends Are Moving Westward, that was Secrets Part 2. And he'll be right.
Yeah.
And, nobody's ever going to hear Secrets Part 2. That's an acoustic demo I wrote many, many years ago. But All My Friends Are Moving Westward is on this new album that we're going to have coming out later this year. And just Marty knows every demo I've ever sent. And so he keeps all that lore and all that knowledge, which I think is really kind of cool. And it's nice to have somebody who's in your band be your biggest fan. And
It is, yeah.
I'm his biggest fan too.
Well, yeah, I definitely think we all need someone like Marty, the archivist. Um, so you obviously mentioned before there is an album coming out. So I mean, I wasn't going to say let's spoil what's coming up, but you obviously touched on there's an album. So I guess what is the plan once Medication's out? I'm assuming are there shows and then an album on the way, or what's the current vibe?
Well, I'm spending a lot of time in the studio at the moment, and that album is more or less done. There's still a few things that I record most stuff. I live in Fern Tree Gully, Victoria, and I record things at my house, but there's things I'm just not set up here to record. So there's a few things like with Marty drums that we want to record for that album before it's going to see the light of day. But it's easily the best thing I've ever worked on. I'm happy to talk about it a little bit. Like it's because this album is really, if I think about writing it and working on it, there are songs that go as far back as 2018 on this record and as recently as maybe last year or the year before. And you always get confused when it's right at the start of the year, like we are right now, about when things happen and what you can call this year. But it's a long album. Like it's going to be about 17 tracks, maybe 16 and like a B-side. And the album's called You Wouldn't Like It Inside My Head. And basically this album is a timeline of, the issues that I had with my mental health and the things I was repressing, having the full mental breakdown that I had, and then picking up the pieces and putting myself back together. And it feels like such a powerful record for that reason. And, I really thought about it. I said, well, I've got all these songs. I've demoed all these songs for it. but I know I would want to think if there was a record by an artist that I loved and they had been working on that record for, I don't know, how many years ago is 2018? 7? If they'd be working on that, well, I hadn't written the whole record 7 years ago, but like parts of that record are 7 years old. And I demoed a lot of these songs as recently, not as recently, as far back as 2020. This record has been getting worked on for that long. Why should I whittle it down? You know, I would want an artist I love to release their epic. And maybe, maybe epic isn't the right word for it, but, something big and long that justifies the amount of time that we've worked on it. And, in the streaming era, people aren't gonna say, Beth, 17 tracks is too long, that album's too long. They're going to pick and choose what they want to listen to. I'd love it for them to sit down and listen to the whole thing because I'm very rarely somebody who'll just listen to a few songs from an album. I'm somebody who loves to listen to albums start to finish as a cohesive piece of art. And I hope there's people that'll do that. But also, I got to be realistic about that.
I mean, I'm someone who exclusively listens to albums in full, like to the point where I avoid singles because I'm usually like, no, I want to hear it as a full cohesive piece. But also, how you mentioned those 17 songs, I think I literally just looked up only about an hour ago. Guided by Voices have a new album out, and it's 17 songs, 39 minutes, and I'm just like, okay, they're obviously pretty short songs, but hey, if you get bored with one, you don't have to wait too long, do you?
Yeah, that's it.
Everyone's a winner. And I would also be remiss to mention as well. So there is also another band you're involved with as well, which I believe is Hormones. So
I'd love to talk about Hormones.
So what can you tell me about Hormones? And I mean the band, not the molecules.
Well, I love those too.
Yeah, of course.
Honk if you love hormones. That's our motto. Hormones. We are working on an album right now as well. I've actually, to record this podcast, I've taken a break from editing Joe's vocals in the studio. I don't sing in that band, but I write all the songs. And it's a band with basically my two best friends in the world, Jimmy Douglas and Joseph Ling, plus Stu Young, who's drummed in just about every punk band in New Zealand and Australia and is probably one of the best punk drummers in the world.
He is amazing, and I can say that as someone because Stu briefly sat in for my band last year.
Yeah. He's truly incredible. He's a truly incredible drummer, and I'd never really met him before Hormones. Or we'd met, but we weren't like mates yet. And just this lineup of people in this band is the most beautiful thing. But as for what it actually is, it started as a Ramones cover band that we put together for Jimmy's birthday last year. It was a birthday present to Jimmy. I'm the biggest Ramones fan on the planet. They're the second biggest Ramones fan on the planet. And Stu's probably the third biggest Ramones fan on the planet. I'm not going to keep ranking us, but it was a Ramones cover band. And we just loved playing together so much. Jimmy's birthday, we played a Ramones cover show. It was a blast. We had the best time. I went home the next day and I wrote 2 songs and I said, we're an originals band now. And at that time, being pretty early days in my transition, I had a lot of dysphoria about my voice and I wasn't really comfortable singing on stage again just yet. Since then I've done a lot of work with my singing teacher Andrea and we've got me to a place where I'm really happy and comfortable with my voice, but I still wanted to write songs and I still wanted to perform. So turning Hormones into an originals band made perfect sense. And so I've been writing all these songs from the perspective of just being a trans woman, finding her place in the world and not being the singer in that band, having Joe being willing to sing whatever words I write. It worked out perfectly for me at that time where I had all that voice dysphoria. And I'm so excited about this band because, if I'm really getting into like vulnerability and my serious side with this album, I'm able to bring out a bit of that sense of humor again in Hormones. And we do touch on some very heavy stuff in these songs. Like these songs are about, transphobia and, being uncomfortable with your identity, but done in a way that has a bit of humor to it. And my motto has kind of always been, let's feel good about feeling bad. And I think Hormones is the perfect distillation of that. It's just a queer band for queer people. And I hope everybody loves it when we put this record out, because we're having a blast playing all these songs live. And you want to talk about writing songs quickly? These Hormone songs, I will write 5 in a day, and that doesn't make them sound rushed. They just are simple and effective and serve the purpose that they need to.
Amazing. Oh, so I should also ask, because so it started out as a Ramones cover band. So are these songs that you're writing now, are they supposed to be sort of in the style of Ramones, or like influenced by, or is it sort of now that it's switched to being originals, you've also got an original sound?
It's definitely still very Ramones influenced, but we've kind of settled into our groove together. But having come together as a group of people who spent a few shows exclusively playing Ramones songs, and our first couple of shows where we played originals, we play 8 Ramones songs and 2 originals. That's how, as a quartet, that's how we learned to play together. So a lot of what we do is very inspired by the Ramones dynamic. And I am to death not a fan of the Ramones core genre, because I think it is a style that people love to say, this is what the Ramones were, and write just these effortless songs that simplify how clever and creative their songwriting actually was to something that doesn't do it justice, which is why you'll very, very rarely hear me call us a Ramones core band unless I have to hashtag something just for discoverability. um, it's very Ramonesy, but it's started to evolve now to be distinctly us.
Amazing. And yeah, I was definitely very careful to avoid the phrase Ramones core, because there's definitely some negative connotations with such a thing. And I could definitely tell, as a huge Ramones fan, you wouldn't necessarily appreciate that. Um, well, I feel like I should get down to the portion of the podcast in which its namesake is derived. So, I mean, I still don't know why I'm actually sort of bothering explaining it every time, but trusty chords sees me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of a standard chord, and I ask you about the 1 artist that's impacted you, 3 albums have influenced you, and 5 songs you can always turn to. And these albums and songs don't need to be by your 1 artist. So, I am very glad to know that you are someone who's done some homework ahead of time here, Beth. So I should ask, who is the 1 artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Well, I feel like everybody would expect me to talk about the Ramones here,
I was wondering if it was going to be the Ramones, if I'm honest.
but they're only one of the bands that I would describe as my favorite band. And if I'm thinking about who has had the most influence on the way that I approach writing lyrics, writing chords, the sound of how I record and mix music, it's the Lemonheads.
Amazing.
And Evan Dando, the genius, the legend, because if I'm thinking from that purely songwriting perspective, Evan Dando is who I've wanted to be in terms of a sound. And when people pick up on that and make that comparison, it makes my heart flutter and butterflies pop into my stomach, because him and his music just means so much to me. And if I look at it through the perspective of lyricism, we want to feel good about feeling bad, right? The Lemonheads have this balance of, there's a sense of humor. If I was a booger, would you pick your nose? That kind of stuff on being around. But the emotions of it. Those songs are so heartfelt and they're so touching and they're so beautiful. But, you know, Evan's singing things like that. He's singing Don't Break My Big Gay Heart, and he just conveys his personality so perfectly and who he is as a person so well uh, through these songs that express things in such a special way. And it's pop music, like every song is catchy, but it's got these layers of big, jangly, shimmering guitars, and they just still rock. They rock so hard, and it's it's beautiful and it's catchy. But you could dance and whip your shirt off and get a bit crazy while listening to it, and it's something beautiful and fun to listen to that reflects, the person who created it. Every choice in a song that Evan Dando writes suits um suits the purpose of the song, right? So, he knows when to get a bit sillier. He knows to get when to get a bit heavier or when to get a bit more heartfelt. And he doesn't need to be releasing music all the time. He'll disappear for a decade at a time and then pop back up with one of the best records you've ever heard. There's something like 10 years between Car Button Cloth and that self-titled Lemonheads record where the backing band is the Descendants, right? And that record is as good as anything they released in the early 90s. It's just as dreamy, it's just as wistful. Uh, and it's all carried by that deep, beautiful voice that he has, smooth as silk. And I think anytime that I listen to them, I just feel transported to a happy place.
Like I can't listen to the Lemonheads without just thinking I just want to write songs that are this good. Like every time I listen to It's a Shame About Ray, I'm just jealous. You know what I mean? Like, even like something that just feels like, like a song like Confetti, for example, which just like flows out. Like the lyrics are so good, it's fun. And you just sort of like, how is he managing to write a song that is like so like it's well written, it feels good, it plays well. It's so many facets. You just like no one should be able to do something this well on all these different like he's firing on all cylinders basically, and it makes you jealous.
Confetti is such a pure song. Um it's such a good example because what are the lyrics to that song? He kind of should have woulda loved to, but he couldn't. Like he's not saying much, but he's saying everything at the same time. And big, sparkly guitars that just make you feel like whatever else is going on around you doesn't matter. You're in that moment and in that song when you're hearing it. You belong to Evan Dando.
And I should ask as well, being a fan of Evan Dando and the Lemonheads, does that fandom also extend to bands like Smudge, for example?
You know, I like Smudge, and obviously they got a massive connection. Was it Tom Morgan?
Yeah, Tom Morgan.
Yeah, because he's in the Lemonheads, and they cover Smudge songs, but they're not a band that I go back to all the time. I can see the connection, and I can see the appeal, but I feel like that love affair I have for the Lemonheads is so directed in that direction, and it goes back so far because I was probably 18. I used to always go through the CDs at op shops, and I found Car Button Cloth, which is not a lot of people's favorite Lemonheads album, but it's mine. Mm. And the second I put it in, I just connected to it on a deep level. And, when I saw them in 2019, that was the first time I was finally able to see them when they came to Australia. And it was at the Hi-Fi, and I got right up in the front row. and they played a bunch of songs off that record, like Hospital, and um, I'm pretty sure they played It's All True and If I Could Talk, I'd Tell You. And it was so good. Somebody's going to look up this show on Setlist FM and they're going to say, what is she talking about? They didn't play any of these songs. But, you know, I think they did.
And that's all that matters, right?
I remember them playing a bunch of songs off that record and I was very happy about it.
Yeah, actually, I think Car Button Cloth would have been my first album of theirs I heard as well. Because I mean, actually, as I speak, I have a Smudge poster above me, and I think the first song I heard was I would have been 13, and I heard The Outdoor Type, and that got me into both the Lemonheads and Smudge. So that was a hell of a gateway drug hearing that song and hearing that album is the first one as well. It's a powerful again gateway drug, I guess, to really sort of opening your mind to what's out there.
Yeah. Oh, and it just launched this whole decades long love affair with power pop that I've had, you know.
You never look back.
Yeah, never look back.
And for my next question, which I feel like is a nice little sort of segue here because we've already talked about some albums and everything. I should say, what are three albums that have impacted you the most? And these could be albums you're always throwing on or something that was integral to your musical evolution.
Things like this I find so hard because I have so many that I love. And, you know, I know you'd be exactly the same
It's
with
exactly
stuff.
why I don't answer the question myself.
Yeah,
I don't know why anyone to ask me.
we're written in the same font with like the love affair of music and the obsessive kind of music fan personality that we both share. But I did at this one, I managed to whittle down to three that are locked in. Once we hit the songs, I'm gonna have a bit of a rougher time because I have alternate picks. But
That's
we'll
totally
see how
fine.
we
You
go.
can have as many honorable mentions as you need.
I've got a whole 2 pages written here that make me look like a mad scientist. You know, it's like an Always Sunny, like Charlie's lyrics to Dayman. You know, but my three albums, and I've picked carefully. And the first one I have to talk about is Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, My Chemical Romance, because I don't think you can be my age and involved in the genres that I'm involved in and not have fallen in love with that band in 2006, 2005. Because up until I heard Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, you know, I was a real like true punks type, you know, like I only listen to this and emos for little wimps. I'm the biggest wimp there is. Who was I fooling? I was a little closeted trans girl, you know. And, you know, MCR are a band with a lot of queer subtext, but that's not why I love them necessarily. It's just an added plus, and it's a nice way to look back at them. What I love about Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, I grew up obsessed with comics and X-Men comics in particular. And it's off frame where I'm sitting in the studio right now, directly next to the computer that I am talking into, is an entire shelf dedicated to just trade paperbacks of X-Men comics. Amazing. It's an entire bookshelf. Nerdy, deep lore. And that is what MCR are in musical form, because Gerard Way has that comic book background. And the songs that come out of that brain all express and create worlds that are just so fleshed out and incredible. This band where every album is a concept album, but a concept album with a theme that you would never... Who else is going to think of that except Gerard Way? You know? And the reason I picked Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge over the Black Parade, firstly, I just like it more. And I fell in love with it first. But this is the one where this comic book world, I think, is more clearly defined. And while the Black Parade is so polished and, you know, there's the Queen influence on it and there's the Bowie influence on it, and it's something that can play in stadiums, Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge is something that feels like it can come out of a dingy punk club You know, it's a truly unique album. It's hard edged. The songs have weird lyrics. They have weird structures. They have weird chromatic chord progressions. Like most of them, like have chords that are out of key. You know, Helena's this massive, like alternative pop hit, and it's got a chorus built around chromaticism in the chord changes. So the band that is there coming up with the instrumentals that are backing this creative vision are doing stuff that's just as weird and just as creative. And it's hooky and catchy and poppy, but it's dark and weird and off putting at the same time. And it's not just a collection of songs, but it's a comic book. It's a story that runs from start to finish. It's the Dark Phoenix saga. It's Watchmen. It's incredible.
Honestly, there are not enough words that I can use to just like share my praise of My Chem. Like, I mean, actually, I'm fairly sure Helena would have been the first song of theirs I heard because I think I remember watching the MTV Music Video Awards back in like 2005, and they were nominated for that song. I remember watching it and thinking, what the hell is this? Because like I think I was watching it for Green Day at the time because I was a real American Idiot fan.
Mhm.
And then I see My Chem come on and I'm like, what the hell? And then like the next year they're everywhere with the Black Parade. And it's just yeah, I mean, having someone like Gerard Way who was so passionate about what he does, and also he's such a fan of the cinematic, like wanting to make stories become so visceral from a musical sense. It's just like he is the music nerd, basically, And so I can see why you just love him. Or sorry, at least love the band, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that love extends to Gerard as well.
Oh, of course. Hey, have you ever heard "Baby You're a Haunted House," like that solo song that he put out? That's
Oh
a
yes,
power pop jam. Come on,
yeah.
that's that's one of the best power pop songs ever written. And that's just him by himself doing some weird shit with skull masks. Um, but he's so creative.
Mm,
And uh, I just I love the way that you express that, that he's a music nerd. He's like us.
mm,
He's a diehard, you know, like a music nerd who's sitting in the dark all through high school, listening to the Misfits and Iron Maiden and David Bowie. And then he emerges from the shadows as this incredible rock and roll front person?
mm. It's truly stunning, and actually, I was gonna say fittingly, I'm pretty sure one of the last times actually I remember actually seeing you in person was actually at the crowd of My Chem when they were here. I
That's right. I'd forgotten about
yeah,
that.
and I was just like, hey, and I was like, so today I was thinking, is there a good chance we're gonna hear a My Chem? And you know what? Right off the bat of the albums, there we go.
And that was something so amazing about that show
Mm,
and all the shows they've done since they would come back. They are not a greatest hits band. They are, we know that everybody who loves this band is obsessed with this band
mm,
and knows every deep cut. And they're playing stuff off Conventional Weapons, an album that never really came out in any true proper form, just a bunch of 7 inches that came out after they broke up, or just before maybe.
yeah.
They're playing deep cuts off every record. My all-time favorite MCR song of 3 Cheers. It's not a fashion statement. It's a fucking death wish.
Mhm.
And again, it's a song without a chorus. It's just this big, long stream of consciousness, and it opens with Gerard screaming an adapted quote from Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman. We hate Neil Gaiman now, but I grew up reading Sandman too.
Mm.
And I'm putting on this record and I'm hearing somebody screaming something that I know came out of a Sandman comic. And then fast forward 20 years and they're playing it live. This song that's not even a hit. I adore that.
Yeah. it's perfect fan service, isn't it? I mean, that said, I would absolutely, love to hear them play Cubicles, but hey, here we are.
Oh, you'll never hear that
I'll never hear
one.
that one happen.
Yeah, that's the only song I think Gerard has ever said, I hate that song, and
I
you'll never
know
hear it.
because I think to me, and I'm aware we're just like nerding out here, but I mean, I think to me, Cubicles is like their one true actual sort of like emo song. Like
Hmm.
that they had their pop punk sort of emo thing, and they helped popularize it. But I think Cubicles is the one that is the real sort of like link between what came before and where they come from. And
Hmm.
I mean, that could be a controversial take to some, but yeah, it's just I would die to hear that live, but it'll never happen. So.
And it's so early in the MCR canon too
Mm,
that you can hear that that probably came from that influence in playing that in that emo scene around New Jersey, but they weren't their own thing yet.
yeah,
And it probably is when they start writing something like Vampires Will Never Hurt You that,
yeah.
that's where they become MCR.
And I feel like we should actually move on to another album here, so we're not just making this the Gerard Way fan hour. But what would the second album for you be, Beth?
uh, I'm a trans woman. Every, everybody knew I had to pick an Against Me record. And it's I could pick probably at any Against Me record here because this is a band I was in love with and I was obsessed with before I knew I was trans, before Laura was out as trans. Like, and this goes back such a long way for me too that I'm picking Reinventing Axl Rose,
Mhm.
the debut album by Against Me.
And what is it about the album specifically? Like, why do you pick that one as opposed to I've suddenly forgotten every album that they've done right now? But yes,
Why not
why the,
Transgender Dysphoria Blues?
that's a perfect example. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of
such an important record to me
course.
and to everyone. But I could pick New Wave, I could pick Former Clarity, like I could pick any record in this place. But this one, I think it comes through to me for its rawness and its realness. And um, you know, having read Laura's book, I think she says that they recorded this album in like a week, 4 days maybe, like, and it's all tracked live, it just raw and real, and it sounds like a band in a basement, like it sounds like a basement show put into a record. And what I love about it is that this record feels like, it's before the fine tuning and they get a bit poppier and the songs become a bit more accessible. Laura is screaming at you all her values, the way she sees the world, the way she sees politics, the way she sees music in excruciating detail, right? These big, long choruses, that whole second half of Anarcho Punks, right?
Mm.
We rock because it's us against them. So clearly defined. This is what I care about. It's like, you're a few drinks deep, you're with one of your best friends, you're sitting down at the pub, and they are just getting really heated on a topic that is so important to them. And that's Laura expressing her opinions on DIY music and on anarchy. And it's just so per- perfect. It's just this beauty of writing rants, and it's a testament to her abilities as a songwriter, even that early in her career, that you could write these songs where hardly anything repeats, or the chorus is about 24 lines long, and people are screaming back every word to you. It
Yeah.
doesn't need a hook. The rant is the hook.
I think what it was that made me fall in love with Against Me was actually like even just the opening track, Pints of Guinness Make You Strong. Just,
Mm-hmm.
having that as a chorus, like it's a sort of thing where like you don't really think like a chorus can like be constructed like that. But it works so well. And you just sort of like, yes. Laura as a songwriter is really onto something here. And you listen to the rest of the album, you're like, fuck, this is amazing. I mean, admittedly, I think for me, I definitely resonate more with their more pop sort of stuff and their more polished stuff. But I mean, I'm certainly not against slumming it and going back to the rawer stuff. You know what I mean?
Hey, I'm
It's
a White
amazing.
Crosses defender till death.
Exactly. There's just so many good, there's so many great entries in that discography.
What a discography,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's not
And
a bad record in it.
and then Laura gets all greedy by having a solo career. That's amazing as well.
Oh, that what's it called? Hole in My Head
Hmm.
from early last year.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
Yeah. It's
What a
so amazing.
record.
And what would your third album be here?
I had to pick a Ramones album, and this was such a struggle for me. And I guess it's more of a ticket to speak about the Ramones broadly.
Mhm.
But I'm going with Road to Ruin
Okay.
because it is this. I love the 80s Ramones uh, so much, but a lot of those 80s albums, I'm happy to admit, or I'm comfortable to admit, that there's not a lot of those 80s records that are good all the way through. And but the hits from those albums, if you back in the day had the Ramones anthology, 2 disc anthology CD, Hey Ho, Let's Go anthology, the second disc with all the 80s stuff on it, that might be the single best disc of Ramones ever released
Mm.
because just all those 80s hits back to back to back when they're getting weird and synthy and creative. But Road to Ruin is an album that's good start to finish. 1979. We're not in the 80s yet, but it bridges the gap between the first 3 albums, the Tommy albums, and the 80s Ramones. Marky first comes in and he takes Tommy's drum style to something that is that same style, but proficient. And I'll die on the hill that Marky Ramone is the perfect drummer.
Yeah.
There's, it's, if you could make a drummer in a lab, it would be Marky Ramone. Uh, you know, he's a hothead, but we love him. We love Marky. Uh, and the Ramones for me, it's the beauty of simplicity, right? I probably don't need to get so much into this because I already ranted about it before. But,
Of course, but hey, feel free.
you know, they've got this wrongful reputation for being silly and dumb. They're not a silly and dumb band. They are a fun band that makes all the right choices and they know exactly what they're doing. But there is an innocence to the Ramones. I like to think of bands have an internal mythology. Musicians have an internal mythology to them that they can get away with singing particular lyrics or covering certain topics based on the band that they are. You know, the Killers can say a trampoline, a loaded gun, and just rattle off a bunch of Americana stuff, but and you just accept it from them because that's who the Killers are. But any other band putting those lyrics, you'd be like, "Come on, groan-inducing. I won't allow it."
Yeah.
The internal mythology of the Ramones is, lobotomies and shock treatment and sniff and glue, and they're not silly and dumb. They've created this world or this place where that's what the world is like. And when you're listening to the Ramones, you're transported to the world of the Ramones, this 50s EC horror comic world where all that stuff is just par for the course. They're the opposite of Against Me. It's the opposite of reinventing Axl Rose. The lyrics are streamlined to be all killer and no filler. They are the simplest rhyme is the best rhyme for those songs. Repeating, why write a second verse when you can do the first verse 3 times and any additional ideas you add to the song just dilute what it's saying, right? That's what's so good about the Ramones, and still not being quite proficient musicians and songwriters, they're free to come up with structures that nobody else really would. And go listen to that record and listen to Questioningly, and you listen to it once and you're like, oh, that's just a nice kind of 70s poppy song. But then look away at the way the chords are put together and the way it's structured. You're like, okay, like Dee Dee's coming up with things here where he's just playing other bits in reverse and it all comes together somehow. They just make it work. And I've loved the Ramones since I was a kid, but the level of obsession I'm at now, it has only grown more as I've aged. There is a shrine in my living room.
You love to see it, don't you? You like I just love seeing people who are passionate about bands. That's one of the reasons I do this podcast. And I mean, and it's also why I'm so glad I'm able to get you on this podcast as well, considering I've had CJ Ramone on here as well. And like end of last year, I was lucky enough to play two shows with Me First, the Gimme Gimmes, and just being able to like share a stage with someone who was in the Ramones. I mean, fuck, it's insane, truly. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could say all the things I want to say about the Ramones, but better and with a lot more passion. But yeah, I love to hear it.
Just look, I just love music and I love an opportunity like this to be able to rant about music and to be able to rant about this band that I have loved so deeply for my entire life, since I was about 13 years old, like just obsessed with them. And I just there's not enough good things in the world for me to say about the Ramones.
Well, that also feels like a perfect segue because my next question is I'd love to know the five songs you can always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all, your five trusty songs. So, top five Ramon song, let's go. No. What are the five songs you picked, Beth?
Oh my God, this was so hard. And I've got extensive notes written here, but there's a good chance, like the five songs that I've written extensive notes about, I'm going to be like, nah, and I'm just going to rant about one of the other ones I've got written in the margins of this page. But all right. I feel like this is a popular pick on this podcast, and everybody is probably going to talk about Springsteen at some point.
Okay.
But oh my God, Thunder Road. 18 years old me. Saxophone player, university saxophone player. I love saxophone from playing ska. One day I'm on my way to a wind symphony thing for uni. And I'm in my dad's car driving me, just oldie station on. Thunder Road comes on. And I'm like, I never heard Springsteen before. But Clarence on that song, Clarence on Born to Run, Clarence on anything, instantly hooked me in. And I think the next day I went to JB Hi-Fi and I bought Born to Run for about $8. And Thunder Road, straight in, again, a song without a chorus, really. Just this essay of lyricism and dusty back roads and transports you to another place. And it brings tears to my eyes whenever I listen to it. And, something so, emotionally heavy, making me feel so good, maybe is not pure joy, but it's a catharsis. And the way Springsteen on that song paints this picture of, our youth is dying, our lives are getting worse. We got to get out of this town before it destroys us. There's this girl by my side. I don't like her that much, but I like her enough. We're going to jump into the car and we're going to drive and never come back. And it's incredible. And I can listen to it a million times and take a different meaning from it every time I hear it.
So I think there's a good chance you may have seen it. But years ago, I shared something on Instagram, which is in Preston, pretty much near me. There's a street called Bruce Street, and right up on the street sign, someone's got a picture, like a little sticker of Bruce Springsteen. And every time I see it, I just think I wish that was Thunder Road, because that would make so much more sense. But no, there is a reason that Springsteen is called the boss, isn't he? He's just like there's something just so amazing because I think my favorite Springsteen album is probably Nebraska because I love the rawness of it, and I would love to hear this fabled electric Nebraska that I don't know if we'd ever hear that, but God, I wish.
I can send you some leaked demos.
I feel like I might have listened to some leak stuff over the years, but at the same time, part of me just wants to be like, I want to hear it the way he sort of had planned it. But I don't know. I mean, that's another rabbit hole we could go into. But while I was thinking of, as you were talking about Thunder Road, then I've always actually, I'd love to actually get an opinion from someone who is aware of Laura Jane Grace's music. I've always felt as though the song "Anna is a Stool Pigeon" is pretty much Laura's attempt at writing a Springsteen song. Do you agree with that?
I can see the similarity, but I also feel a lot of like a Bob Dylan-y sort of
That too.
vibe to
Yeah.
that one as
There was
well.
a social injustice sort of angle
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think like to me, where her Springsteen influence shines the most, White Crosses, track 3, Because of the Shame. And that is an 80s Springsteen song.
Yeah.
Stick It on the River, you know? um,
I can see that. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I think I'm gonna re-listen to that afterwards with a bit of a different view. But before I do that, what would your second song be?
New Radicals, You Get What You Give. And
The ubiquitous song of 2000 and then every commercial for years onwards.
as a songwriting fanatic, Greg Alexander appeals to me. And you can tell he didn't want to be famous. You know, this is a guy, the video for their biggest hat, his face is obscured under bucket hat for the whole thing. There's a great Todd in the Shadows video about this song where he goes into all that kind of stuff in detail. But I'm already at risk of giving you the longest episode of your podcast of all time.
Getting
So,
close, but hey, you know what? I love breaking records, so let's go.
you know, um, all the listeners are going to be like, who is she? Why she got so much to say? I don't have enough time for this.
It's free
But
content; they can deal with it.
every choice in You Get What You Give is so perfectly chosen and perfectly calculated to make that song better. We're just going to pull out this little guitar riff once, 3 verses into the song. We are going to put little falsetto notes and flourishes and but it's catchy, but it's got lyrics that paint a picture. And I love the way that he writes that outro bridge sort of bit is like a prank on the audience
Mm.
because it's got this whole big rant about hating big business and big bankers buying, killing while they're multiplying. And then the second half, he's just dissing Hanson and Courtney Love and Marilyn Manson. And that's all anybody cares about.
Mm-hmm.
But that song, it just gives me joy and goosebumps to listen to it.
I feel the same way, but honestly, however, I always feel somewhat like reticent to actually admit it because I almost feel like people are going to be like, "Really, you like that song, this ubiquitous pop song?" But I'm like, Greg Alexander is an amazing songwriter. I mean, listen to anything else from that New Radicals album. I mean, even things like, Mother, We Just Can't Get Enough or Someday We'll Know and things like that. He just writes such brilliant songs. And it's such a shame that like he didn't do more with New Radicals, but I mean, he like because didn't he also have like a solo album that was supposed to come out or something?
Well,
Or am I getting
in
things
the
wrong?
early 90s, he had some really weird solo stuff that
Hmm.
I think he did for a major label, and he's trying to be all sexy in the video and
Yeah,
stuff.
right,
And he's
okay.
still got hair, and it feels so uncomfortable, and it's really not him. As for a solo album to come after New Radicals, I've got no idea, but he's
Yeah,
such a
I could be wrong,
recluse,
but
right?
yeah.
But, yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that. But, it's look at the songs he writes for other people. Nobody else would think of Murder on the Dance Floor. That could only come out of his head.
And hey, and look where that song is now. Jesus,
Mhm.
that's gone crazy. And what would is it our third song we're up to, or our second? Oh, our third song. What's that third one?
Song number 3, Billy Bragg, Sexuality.
Hmm.
And
Okay. The first thing I'm thinking of is the one lyric in there, the world's worst rhyme in my mind, but I'm sure you
Robert
know
De
the
Niro, Mitsubishi Zero.
exactly.
I totally agree. But again, the internal mythology of Billy Bragg
Of
music,
course,
he
he
can
can
get
get
away
away
with
with
it.
it.
You
Yeah,
know, you're going to be thinking about internal mythology a lot now
always.
that I've said this. Um, I love this song before I ever really knew what it meant to me. And I love a lot of artists who are big on politics But I also love when they sing about things that aren't politics. But there's a political angle to sexuality, of course. It's a statement in itself. But, I everything I know about like socialism and communism started with listening to Billy Bragg records when I was 15.
Honestly, same.
But I love when he's so cheeky and he's so fun because he's such an endearing person. And I went to the show, it must have been 2 years ago now, the three, where he was doing like
Yeah.
a night of three albums and a night of the other three albums. And I went to the second night because Workers' Playtime is my favorite Billy Bragg record.
Mm.
And I died when he played a lot of those songs. I was crying like a baby for so much of it. And he played Sexuality as well. Obviously, don't try this at home. And like, it has this statement to make, and it does it in such a fun way. I know that, investing all that money into this pop album that he was paying back for years didn't do much for his career. But look what it produced, like Johnny Marr's on this song, Kirsty McCall's on this song. Like, it is star-studded, beautiful pop hit that tells you, hey, don't be ashamed. It's so sex positive. It's so accept everybody. And I guess you can see why that would resonate with me.
Most definitely. But I mean, it's like there's just something about the way he's able to actually make these songs sound so good as well. Like, songs like I'm forgetting his entire discography now, but I was listening to I'm Waiting for the Great Leap Forward only yesterday. And I mean, that's a song that always makes me like almost weep in some way. There's something just so sweet about the positivity in there and like the sadness of it all as well. And I'm just like, these things shouldn't be able to be wrapped up in these nice little pop songs that he makes, or even like these like not necessarily pop songs, but like these folky songs as well. Is he's just such a master of writing these things and making them so direct and effective as well. And Sexuality is a great example of that.
Yeah, the stories that he can write, with the examples that he chooses to give, Must I Paint You a Picture is such a beautiful song. And the way he talks about, the most important decisions in life are made between two people in bed. Nobody else would think of a turn of phrase like that. Only him.
Well, I mean, even just it's funny enough, actually, I was thinking of Billy Bragg again only yesterday because on Friday I celebrated 15 years since I've known my wife. The next day I got a new tattoo, and all I could think of was that one line, celebrating my love for you with a pint of beer and a new tattoo.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking of that. I was like, I just love that line. There's something just so sweet about the way he's able to get right into the psyche of the human condition and everything.
Yeah. He's a real one.
He truly is.
A true real one. Bless up.
He is. What would our fourth song be?
Oh, I've got to get in the weeds now of what I've picked. But, I'm going to stay the course with the ones that I picked. And I'm going with Dismantle Me by the Distillers. And this is an album cut by the Distillers. And it means a lot to me in my life because this song I fell in love with because one day in high school, I walked into music class. I sat at the table I always sat at in this class. And somebody from one of the older classes had left a lyric sheet printout on the table. And I sat down at my table and saw it there. I was like, I'll read this. And it was the lyrics to Dismantle Me. And it's just, it spoke to me in that moment. I was reading it. I'm like, what is this? It's talking about, vultures and like all this really like, it's dark imagery. Like I had to go home and hear this song and see what it was all about to know what it's getting at. And something I love about Brody's lyricism is that she has had such a difficult life and so many struggles. And the way that she chooses to portray that pain is through something that's not super literal, right? Burying this hurt and this pain under layers of metaphor So what you get is not so much a story as a feeling. And, at the time of that album, Coral Fang, it's her album post the divorce from Tim Armstrong. And she feels like she doesn't belong anywhere. And she's wants to talk about like her worth as a person coming from herself and not from who her husband is. And getting married so young, like, has she been able to forge an identity outside of the supervision of an older man, you know? And I feel like that's where Dismantle Me comes from. But she does it in this way where if I am having a difficult time and I just need to unleash and get some anger out, Coral Fang every time, you know? And in from the songwriting perspective of like the chord structures and stuff, the chord choices and the chord changes, they suit the song, but not necessarily the key. And those chord changes complement so well the pain and the hurt in those lyrics.
Brady is such an amazing musician who I really feel is underrated because of the relationship she's had. Like everyone seems to think of like, Rancid or Queens of the Stone Age, and they're never sort of giving her that sense of agency, which I feel like songs like Dismantle Me are a great example of why she deserves that, because she writes these amazing tracks.
Impossibly underrated.
Yeah.
Like those Distillers records, oh my God. Like Spinner, like she does not miss.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, and it's an entire other podcast where we need to talk about music industry misogyny, but we don't have the time or the space, and it's probably not the arena to talk about it today. But if anybody who listens to this goes out and gives the Distillers their shine and listens to something that Brody's doing, that would make me a very happy girl.
I'm still actually very disappointed. So a few years ago, I was in Texas and I saw the Misfits, like the original lineup of the Misfits. The original Misfits, not the original lineup per se, but the lineup was supposed to be Misfits, Alice Cooper, and the Distillers. And the Distillers had to pull out at the last minute. And admittedly, yeah, I was so disappointed. Admittedly, I think, we got Fear in their place. And I'm like, that's still a pretty damn good lineup. I'm not going to say no to Fear. But I've not yet had the chance to see the Distillers, but God, I want to, because Brody is just such an amazing musician. Plus, the whole fact that she's from Melbourne as well. I mean, that's a, champion the local girl. You know what I mean?
Oh, we love a hometown hero.
Hell yeah.
And we love a local queen.
Absolutely. And we have one song left from the 5 songs, but I'm sure there's plenty of honorable mentions we can list off afterwards. So what would your 5th song be?
I'm going to rattle off the honorable mentions, and then I'm going to speak about the last song at length.
Sure.
So here are all the songs that I did not have the time or space to pick. Thank you for letting me speak as much as you have so far.
And I will certainly be adding all these in the list on my website as well, so people can check these out.
Brilliant. Okay. Can't Hardly Wait by The Replacements. Just a beautiful, beautiful arrangement. Horns, strings, love it. Paul Westerberg's voice, lyricism, love it. Missy Higgins, Scar, an Australian classic, a queer anthem before any of us knew it was a queer anthem, and a song, again, that resonates with me so deeply, being about changing yourself to appease other people. You Really Got Me by the Kinks, because it's a pure distillation of rock and roll, and it's a lot of that same stuff that I talk about with the Ramones. And I'm very obsessive over the Kinks as well. But this song, this guitar solo that Dave Davies doesn't even know how he played, it's punk before punk. It's the most beautiful thing. Stars Are Blind by Paris Hilton. She has no right to have a song that good. No, you know what? That's unfair, because I love Paris. I've got Paris Hilton brand pajamas. I love her. She's an icon. But I mean, it's unexpected, right? Because it's such a beautiful song. It's so beautifully written and it's so beautifully performed. Like, it's so bare bones, and the way that her voice is plain only serves a song. Also, why is it ska?
Yeah, that's all. That's always been my question for it. I'm like, it is it's a great song for sure, but I'm just like, did it have to be ska? Like,
I love ska.
I mean, I do as well. But I'm just like, I did not ever expect Paris Hilton to be sort of doing that real sort of, ska vibe. But hey,
Do me a
no,
favor. If you haven't, read her memoir.
I have
Do
not
it.
yet. Okay,
It's one of my favorite books I've ever read.
amazing,
She's an amazing person, a truly incredible person who was treated so unfairly
100%.
by the media. We love her. This is not the misogyny episode. We're not going to get into that. My last honorable mention before I get into the main song is Three Small Words by Josie and the Pussycats.
Okay, this is actually one I don't know because I have never. Well, I should say I'm going to assume you're probably taking it from the Josie and the Pussycats movie. It's from. I've never seen the movie. I know, I know. For anyone listening, I'm currently getting a look.
Yeah. I'm shocked because, as a power pop nerd, Adam Schlesinger wrote a bunch of songs on
I know
that album.
Actually, to be fair, that was only something I discovered only sort of relatively recently. Because I mean, Adam is his passing is felt by me every day. And yeah, but I have sadly not actually seen the movie. I don't know whether it was just because when it came out, it was sort of like, not cool for me who was into that sort of like, who was into different music at the time to venture that way. But I've just never gotten around to it since. So this is a good recommendation for me to actually fix my life and do so.
It's a movie with a strong anti-capitalist message, and which is amazing. It's so funny. It's so well acted. It's so well cast. And the music, I listen to that soundtrack every month. Like, it's just this amazing pop punk album. The vocals are by, I always forget her name, from Letters to Cleo.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah. And it's got that major label polish, early 2000s major label polish, and she sounds incredible. But, I'm a punk rock prom queen. That's me. And there's one song on Songs I Wrote in High School called Mary Jane. And that is definitely, that chorus is just me trying to write Three Small Words when I was 16.
I was also really hoping I'd have the answer to who the vocalist of Letters to Cleo is right now, and it's coming up as we speak, but my internet is incredibly... Is it Kay Hanley? Kay Hanley was the lead vocalist of Letters to Cleo. Well, still is, I guess. They're back together these days. Amazing. Now, we have one final song. So what is your final song, Beth?
Hey Jealousy by the Gin Blossoms.
Yes. Absolutely beautiful song.
And we adore it. It's so... it's power pop perfection, and it's got these beautiful, again, like Lemonheads. I keep using the word shimmery to describe guitars. It
works. It really works.
It's what they are. It's just this wall of things that sound so bright and perfect, but again, having fun while feeling horrible. The absolute devastation of and of Doug Hopkins' lyrics on that song and any of the songs he wrote, but that one in particular, if you don't expect too much from me, you might not be let down.
I adore that line. It's so good.
It's a line that's meant so much to me in my life, and it's such a fun song. And again, the structure's weird. They bring back the first verse, then the last chorus isn't really the chorus, and then there's sort of like a half verse kind of thing in the outro. The structure's weird, and you don't really hear so much of that now from like a rock band that would come out on a major label. But the 90s, we were just letting people do stuff, and that's great. And as I say on that La Familia record, we're having a bad time and we're having a ball, and that's what I love about it. He paints this sense of nostalgia with driving around the town and letting the cops chase us around. Nostalgia for a time that wasn't really that good, that it's kind of tongue-in-cheek and charming that he's being nostalgic about times in his life where bad things happened because he doesn't have anything good to look back on. And obviously, to lose a songwriter of that caliber because of his mental health is tragic. But we're so lucky to have the songs that we have from him, because the songs that he wrote and the very few songs on that first no, it's not even the first Gin Blossoms album, the first major label Gin Blossoms album, because he was kicked out of the band during recording. There's only a couple of his songs on there. It's good that we got to hear those couple of songs with some major label production and the production that they deserved, because he has a lot more on the first record, but it doesn't sound anywhere near as nice.
Yeah, because Hey Jealousy was recorded for that first album as well, wasn't it? But then it was re-recorded for New Miserable Experience. Am I getting the album name right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I always blank on the name of the first one, but
Dusted, is it?
Yes, that's it. That one, because I don't listen to it so much, but it's so, that original version is a lot faster. It's got maybe not a punk vibe, but certainly it's a lot rockier, and the lyrical phrasing is less smooth. The irony of me stumbling over saying that, my lyrical phrasing was not so smooth just then. But the major label version irons out those edges, and sometimes, it's, take away my punk card right now, sometimes a more polished version of a thing can make it better.
I will agree 100% with that. I mean, I also feel as though like Gin Blossoms are another one of those bands who are incorrectly classified as a one-hit wonder, mainly for Hey Jealousy. I forgot the name of the damn song for a second because of Hey Jealousy. But I mean, their discography, it's so amazing. I mean, even on the album after Doug died, Congratulations, I'm Sorry, you've got these amazing singles. And I mean, like, I'm like Follow You Down, Do You Hear It From Me, and things like that. They are so good. And
it sold more.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a bigger record.
Exactly. I don't know why people persist. I mean, this is just going to turn into the Gin Blossoms, like, justice for GB. But why do people keep like referring to them as a one-hit wonder when they've got this amazing discography? And I mean, I know because I've got a lot of friends from the US state of Arizona where Gin Blossoms are from, and they will definitely say, they are a band who are very well revered still, and rightly so. Yeah, I could talk for hours about Gin Blossoms as well, apparently.
We can talk for hours after we get off the call, after we get off the recording.
But look, I think in the interest of time, and because we are, I think this might be now the longest podcast I've recorded for this. And
oh my God, I'm so sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I should say, Beth Seymour, I want to say thank you so very much for your time today and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast.
Thank you. I love being here so much.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, there's no obligation, but I'm forever grateful if you do. Hell, feel free to write out the name and post it to your neighbours. Probably won't do much, but hey, any little bit helps. As always, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. There's also a blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's tylerjenke/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. You know by now what you can find on the site, but you can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running, if you feel so inclined. Lastly, I need to thank Beth Seymour for spending time with me this week for the podcast. It was a true pleasure to talk to a music nerd. And I should say, a music nerd on the same level as myself. Thank you, Beth. It was a true pleasure. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.